All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly Gaza War update. As usual, it's my pleasure to be joined by Generals Amidror and Ayish. We've got a lot to discuss, perhaps even more than usual. So we'll skip any formalities and jump right into a bunch of different things we want to cover. And as usual, a reminder for our audience who's filing in at the moment, if you have any questions for the panel, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to address them in the time we have. So obviously there's a lot to talk about in terms of Hezbollah and Iran, but I want to start, given that this is the Gaza War update. General Ayish, I'd like to start with you. I don't want anything that's happened in Gaza or relating to Hamas to get lost in the headlines. Could you give our audience sort of a quick update of where IDF operations are in Gaza, specifically regarding Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor?
Okay. Let me remind our participants what were the goals of this campaign in Gaza. We wanted to destroy Hamas, and for that sake, we are going after four elements. One is the military leadership. Second is the military infrastructure. The third is the political leadership, and the fourth element is really to cut the lines of supply and the oxygen that is supplied via the Philadelphia corridor to Hamas, and by that, literally, to allow a new entity to control the Gaza Strip. Right now, if I'll try and assess the situation in Gaza according to those goals, when it comes to the military leadership and the military capabilities of Hamas, it seems like we are really in a good situation. I would dare to say that in terms of formations, basically those formations they have had at the beginning of the campaign doesn't exist as formations any longer. Don't get me wrong, there are terrorists in the Gaza Strip, and we are killing dozens on a daily basis. But they have transformed from military formations into guerrilla fighters, and that's basically what we are doing right now in many places. Rafah, the Philadelphia axis, Khan Yunis, we are there again, and in some other places in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. As we see things unfold, immediately we react. And I would dare to say that basically we have moved from the second phase to the third phase, and that's what we are going to see in the next few months in Gaza Strip, with less formation, Israeli formations for that, with less resources invested to achieve those goals. But basically, we will continue until we'll finish the mission, and the mission will take time. Let's take just the case of Philadelphia. For the sake of discussion, we have found dozens of tunnels going from the Gaza Strip into Egypt. Some of them were sealed, some of them were still used, some of them fortified with concrete, some of them allowed literally vehicles to move from one side to the other. We have a lot to do. It will take time. It will take a lot of resources and explosives if we want to complete that mission. And without completing this mission of cutting those lines of supply, basically, they'll be able to rebuild their capabilities. So in that sense, I think there is a lot to discuss about that. When it comes to the other areas where they are trying to renew their capabilities, that's exactly what we are doing. We are literally eliminating them immediately once they are identified. That's what we have seen a few weeks ago in Deir al-Balach, in Bet Lahia, and now we can see it in Khan Yunis. So all in all, we are in the right direction when it comes to the Gaza Strip. It will take us time, but I would dare to say that we are in the right direction to complete the mission of dismantling Hamas as a military entity, I would say effective entity in the Gaza Strip.
So thank you.
If I may add,
please, General.
I heard about the CNN program which try to assess the level of success of the IDF, and they say that it is that the Hamas is reorganized and regrouped and so on and so forth. Guys, it's nonsense. Don't tell the CNN that that's what I said. Take example a battalion somewhere in North Gaza. They had 1,000 terrorists under the battalion. We killed around 700, 750. These are the numbers. And let's assume the CNN is right, and they recruited new terrorists into the lines in the last 3-4 months. And now they have a battalion. With all due respect, it's not a battalion. It's a battalion that 2/3 of it are new recruited guys which don't have any training, exercise, and so on and so forth. The brigade, which in the past was the frame within which the 4 or 5 battalions acted together, does not exist at all. They don't have any center of communication, any center of intelligence. They lost the ability to support with anti-tank missiles the forces. So formally, they can say that they have a battalion, but this is not the battalion which they had at the beginning of the war, not even close to that. So even if formally CNN is right and the battalion declared itself as a battalion and they nominated someone to be the commander of the battalion, and they found substitutes for all the company commanders which had been killed. We killed probably more than 100 company commanders during the operation, close to 150. So most of them are dead, and they can nominate new guys, but with no experience, training and experience, and in most of the cases, not with the weapon system that they had at the past. And as General I said, when we are cutting the border and we destroyed all the places in which they produce the weapon systems, and we probably destroyed almost all of them, every RPG that they are launching, every rocket that they are launching is lost. They don't have somewhere to buy or to produce the next one. So slowly, their ability is eroded by what they are doing and by what we are doing. So CNN didn't understand the situation at all. And his effort of the CNN to show a failure of the IDF show only one thing: they failed to understand the situation.
So let's expound on this and help give CNN a little bit more clarity to build off both of your remarks. So General Ayish, I was struck by one of the things you said in your opening remarks, which is the IDF is in the process of moving to phase 3, for lack of a better term. This is something we've been hearing a lot about in various ways for months now. And I almost note between you and General Amidror, almost a note of optimism compared to where we were in recent weeks and months, maybe when we were hearing about how difficult it was for the IDF to work through Rafah, how everything was booby-trapped, and it was very, very difficult operational circumstances. So is it fair to say that the pivot toward phase 3 is due to what General Amidror mentioned, which is this degradation of Hamas's combat and operational coherence, in addition to, would you say the Rafah tactical situation is it partly that's gotten to a point that's manageable now, and the border along the Philadelphia access is secured? Is this all what adds up to the IDF being able to talk about moving to phase 3? Am I missing something there, or is that sort of a thesis statement that sums up for CNN what we've just talked about?
No, it's an adaptation that the IDF is doing. Let's try and give some signs to our audience of what does it mean phase C. Basically, there is an operational activity. The offense is still there. We talked about Khan Yunis. It's happening in Tel Sultan. It's happening in Rafah. It's happening in Brazil. It's happening with the infrastructure that we have discovered and exposed along the Philadelphia axis and elsewhere. But basically, what we are doing is done with much less resources and forces. In order to achieve it, you can invest less resources. This is one sign. The second one is the investment in destroying, demolishing the infrastructure that we are exposing. We talked about tunnels. We didn't have time to speak about workshops, labs, hidden places, command control places, places where they were hiding stashes of millions of shekels and dollars and armament, etc. Now we have the time to expose it and to destroy it. Bear in mind that we are generating new intelligence. How we are doing it, General Amidror spoke about it last time. By interrogating those who were captured by us, we are exposing new infrastructure, new intelligence that guide us and direct us in a very precise way to the new places. Without completing the mission of the infrastructure, the military infrastructure, we won't be able to say that we have dismantled Hamas. It's not enough to dismantle those battalions that we discussed. We have to finish the infrastructure, and we have to make sure that they don't have a new source of armament as they had in the past from the Philadelphia axis. So at the end of the day, it's an integration of those elements. The whole issue now is that we are doing it on a different pace, on a different scale. Let's take as an example, last word about Rafah. We have the time in Rafah. Most of this refugee camp is booby-trapped. Now, we are using all type of technologies in order to expose it. We have the time now. First of all, we have moved the population from there into the humanitarian zone. We are allowing, via new paved roads that we build, supply to those humanitarian zones, while at the same time, we are exposing those houses that were booby-trapped, and we are demolishing them. Now, when I'm talking about a house that is booby-trapped, it's not an idea. We are talking about barrels, inside rooms of hundreds of kilograms of explosives. So it's not on a scale that we have met in Lebanon or you guys in Afghanistan. It's a different scale. It's a whole house. It's a whole neighborhood. Once you blow it up, the whole neighborhood collapses. So this is the scale. And we have to take the time in order to complete the mission on Philadelphia, in Rafah, in Brazil, in those areas, and to gain full control above and under the ground. Otherwise, they'll be able, to generate new capabilities. And that's the punch.
Thank you, General Ayish. And just to reiterate, even Phase C, even though it may be less intense, we've always heard from our Israeli interlocutors that doesn't mean it'll be a short phase, open-ended and could take more time, I think, than a lot of Americans necessarily expect. General Amidror, I'd like to pull back the view a little more broadly. There's been a lot, at least in the American press, about the fallout from Ismail Haniyeh's death, Yahya Sinwar's promotion to the head of Hamas, and then the confirmation that Mohammed Deif was killed. A lot of moving parts there at the top of the Hamas organization. I would love to get your thoughts on what this means for Hamas, maybe strategically, and also it's being portrayed in a lot of the mainstream press here in America as this is a blow to ceasefire talks, and would love to get your reaction to that comment.
I don't know how it will blow the ceasefire negotiations, because the one who was responsible for the negotiations, who was the real negotiator, is Sinwar, who is still in Gaza and will remain in Gaza. With all the respect to Haniyeh, and I don't have any, he just represents Sinwar in Qatar, that's all. When the negotiations had been taken part in Egypt, someone else represents Sinwar in the negotiations. So the negotiator was and is Sinwar, because he is controlling the only asset that Hamas has, the hostages. Haniyeh does not control them, they cannot make any decision about it. So I don't think that in principle it will change. I mean, tactically they can stop it or pause or whatever, because they have to react to the fact that they lost Haniyeh. and Mohammed Def both. But practically, I don't see any change. The fact that he was elected as the new leader of Hamas is significant to what we are claiming all the time, that Hamas is a terror organization, nothing more than that. And here is the stamp. It's clear this is the situation. Now the chief terrorist is controlling the organization, an organization which does not have too many assets outside Gaza, and he's losing assets in Gaza slowly. And Rafah was described by General Ayish is a good example. And what remain is some maybe two battalions, weak battalions, one in Bir al-Balah and one in one of the camps in the center. And slowly he's losing those places which had been kind of legend in when we spoke about Hamas. And you can see that Hamas is not relevant. No one asked the question, okay, what will be the reaction of Hamas to the annihilation of assassination of Haniyeh and the fact that Def was killed somewhere in his bunker with the brigade commander of Khan Yunis. What was the reaction of Hamas from Gaza? Did you hear about it? 5 rockets which had been launched after 2 weeks into Israel, and only one of them reached any target anticipated by our Iron Dome. So Hamas is less relevant. The fact that it was not mentioned at all when people spoke about both Haniyeh and Def means that slowly is becoming irrelevant militarily. And if the negotiation will not stop us, we will continue to expose the tunnels and we are doing huge effort now to increase the ability to do it. We need more people and more machines to do it, and to finish the job in Rafah. We need, according to some of the commanders on the ground, 2 months. I think that 3 months will be more realistic, but within August, September, October, a year after the beginning of the war, a year and a month, we will be after dismantling all the battalions and the brigades in Rafah, in Gaza, and full military control. And Hamas is becoming, in Gaza, is becoming less relevant. The only asset that they have are the hostages, and with that, they're trying to play. And this is what we are now in the middle of negotiations about that. Will it succeed or not, I don't know, because we are not ready to give up the control of the Philadelphia. Somehow it should be controlled by Israel. Otherwise, we will lose the ability to separate Hamas from Egypt, and they can bring new armament into the Gaza Strip. And this is the hardcore of the problem between us and Hamas. There are other issues we hadn't been concluded yet, but I think that this is the main issue. So I don't see any real importance in the fact that Sinwar is becoming formally because he was a negotiator before and he will remain a negotiator in the future.
So thank you, General Amidror. I know, honestly, I could spend the rest of the hour just talking about Gaza, but obviously there's the elephant in the room, which is the potential for an attack from Iran or Hezbollah or the Axis more broadly. So I want to try to cover as much of that as possible. We've heard a lot of reports back and forth, at least both in the American and Israeli press, about messaging from both Iran and the United States as it concerns what's about to happen. I'll start off, I guess, General Ayish, I'll start with you as a question from our audience. It's been reported that the U.S. has warned Iran that if Iran attacks Israel, the U.S. will attack Iran. I know there's a lot of heavy words and parsing in that sentence, but I just love to get your reactions to that, because we're seeing a lot of swirling headlines about what might be happening.
The thing that I have heard is that should Iran attack Israel, Iran might be destroyed. No one said in that quote that it will be done by the US. This is the quote that I have heard. Maybe it's my ears or my sentiment, but that's the exact quote. And now to be more specific, there are a few elements that we have to be aware to the US presence in the region. First of all, it has the strategic signal to the region. Second, it's the US mission about American passport holders which live in along the whole region. And there is a mission for the US forces to allow them to be evacuated. And that's why we can see expeditionary forces, Marines, and many others, not only from Lebanon, but also from other countries in the region. And it's a permanent mission of CENTCOM. The third mission is the joint architecture that was built for many years and sharpened together with CENTCOM in the last, I would say, 2 years. And I'm talking about the air and missile defense architecture, which allow Israel, together with the US and together with other players, as it was proven in April 13 and 14, to eliminate and to defend Israel. And by the way, not only Israel, also American forces that are deployed in the region and other players that I don't want to mention them by name. But this operational architecture, together with other assets, mainly US assets and other assets in the region, together with Israeli capabilities, are a key third element. The fourth element is the logistic backup that we can get from a US presence in the region. When you are talking about the different US flotillas and the access to US resources here, it's very significant. But I would say that in terms of retaliation, in terms of operational offensive capabilities, at least from my experience in the IDF, it's 100% Israeli capabilities. And now the big question is, are we going to take a preemptive approach, a concurrent approach, an approach and retaliation that would come after? This is something that we can discuss later. But in that sense, I would like to emphasize that Israel is about to defend and to attack, should it be needed, with its own capabilities.
So thank you, General Ayish. Just a follow-up question based on that. I guess could you give us a sense here? Assuming it's a largely American audience, sort of what the pulse or the temperature is in Israel now. I know we've heard something about the preparations, sort of bracing Israel bracing itself for what may come. What is it? Is it a waiting game? Is there a sense that this could be anything? It could be any time.
I'll tell you. I took my grandchildren yesterday and the day before yesterday to some events because it's a holiday, it's a vacation, and they were with us 2 days. So we went to some centers which are open in Israel for children. It was full of children. The Israelis they know how to separate between the military prepares and alarm and readiness and so on and so forth, and the life in the street.
So General Amidror, so that Israeli civilians, from your anecdote, are willing to go on with living their lives. In terms of the military's preparation, could you give us maybe a little bit deeper sense of what that's like? And again, we're hearing all sorts of things about, Iran is going to launch an overwhelming attack, or now Iran is thinking about scaling back its attack. It may be with Hezbollah, it may be separate.
All that are manipulations. What you hear in the media, no one knows what the Iranians are preparing. No one knows what Hezbollah is preparing. I hope that our intelligence is penetrated to the decision-making process, and they know something. But outside the intelligence, what you read and what you hear, with all due respect to all those networks and newspapers, they don't have a clue.
General Ayish, is there anything you'd like to add to that question? Because I threw a lot out there.
First of all, let me join General Amidror by saying that I did the same yesterday and today with my granddaughters. So basically, we are on the same page, and we basically on the same areas in the central part of Israel in Tel Aviv, and right now in the area of Caesarea. So, Israelis know to distinct, and this is our life. We are already 10 months in war. The issue is that we have to add to it the residents of the north that were uprooted from their houses at the first days right after October 7th, and they are still out of their villages and the city of Kiryat Shmona. And in the south, quite a lot of them are back to their villages, but we still have to complete the mission, prepare their villages, and to make sure that all the others who want they can be back to their villages. Having said that, I would say that the IDF is under constant alert. And in terms of air and missile defense, I've elaborated on that together with the US. And today we had a second visit in 1 week of General Kurila, the commander of CENTCOM. And let me remind our audience that we, JINSA, were the first organization who wrote after the Abraham Accord about the need of Israel to move from the EUCOM AOR to CENTCOM AOR. And now we can harvest the fruits of that transformation. This is in terms of air and missile defense, but I can tell you that in terms of readiness in the north, and in the south, it's not only air and missile defense, it's also ground forces, which are defending the border and making sure that we are not going to be surprised again. And we have to be very humble here, on the ground or via the air or by the maritime domain. And that readiness is kept in the north and in the south. And now the big elephant in the room is, to my opinion, not Iran, because with Iran you have the distance, and it has a certain advantage. The range have certain advantage. The elephant in the room is Hezbollah, and the big question is what type of approach Israel is about to take. Are we going for a preemptive approach in order to prevent Hezbollah to surprise civilian centers over here in Israel? Are we going to take a parallel approach, which is attacking while they are attacking, or we are going to do something defensive at the first stage, assess the situation, and then decide how we are going to retaliate? Definitely, it seems to me that in Iran and in Lebanon, Hezbollah, they are thinking and rethinking the situation and assessing it time and time again before they are choosing a course of action. Because I think it's not a one-shot scenario. It's going to be a sequential one, and one thing is going to drag another. And I'm not sure that they are fully aware to the possible consequences, not only on Lebanon, not only on Hezbollah, not only on their military infrastructure and leadership and military leadership, but also when it comes to Iran. And we have heard today the request that came from the Iranian president to the supreme leader not to escalate.
So I'm just a quick follow-up question. It seems like a lifetime ago now, but I think in our weekly update right before the Hezbollah strike on Majd al-Shams that killed a dozen youngsters, there was talk of Israel was adopting something like strategic patience in the north, or was going to at least try to. Is that completely irrelevant now, or does that depend on what Hezbollah does or does not do in the coming days and weeks?
I think the signal that we gave when we decided to take number 2 in Hezbollah have a few meanings, and I'm sure that General Amidror will elaborate on that. First of all, we have access to number 2. Now, when you have access to number 2, immediately think about the implication about number 1. You know, it resonates. And the fact that it was so precise, so accurate, I think has its own signal as well. And it was very clear that we are trying, you know, to limit our response in one hand, but at the same time to send a very aggressive message after the killing of the 12 kids in Majd al-Shams. And it was simply killing of them. So now they will have to assess and consider the situation and decide to where they want to take it. And as I said, it's not a one-shot scenario. It's going to be sequential. And the IDF is preparing himself for the different options, and all of them are on the table.
Thank you. So, General Amidror, sort of ask you a similar question in a little bit different way. There was kind of a blockbuster article here in the Wall Street Journal last weekend that said the IDF reservists are fatigued and shot out from the war in Gaza, and it's affecting Israel's readiness for a war in the north. And I know this is part of a larger set of issues that you're immersed in. I would be curious to get your thoughts on that opinion, and if indeed the IDF, its readiness for potentially a large-scale war in the north, which, as we all know, would be rather different than what we've seen in recent operations.
I didn't read the article in the American newspaper, but I think that someone is missing here in a big way the way of thinking of the Israeli society. I think that today the support for a war in Lebanon, when everyone understands that the meaning of that is huge recruitment of reserve forces, is huge. And if that will be initiated by Hezbollah, you will see that more than 100% of the unit will be ready before they will be recruited. People will go to their units before they will be called. Someone doesn't understand the situation now in Israel. After the because of the fact that 80,000 Israelis are out of their homes, and the fact that 12 children have been assassinated by Hezbollah in the north, the atmosphere in Israel today is more anti-Lebanon than more anti-Hezbollah than if you ask people, okay, to continue in Gaza or to begin a war in Lebanon. People will tell you to begin a war in Lebanon because people understand that Hamas is less and less relevant. The majority of the people living in the envelope of Gaza went back home. There are 3 kibbutzim which didn't because we have to, it will take time to build them. But in most of the other places, the majority is there. And in Lebanon, the feeling in Israel that we have to do something strong, even extreme, to change the situation on the ground, to let the people go back to their homes. So I don't know who wrote this newspaper, but my suspicion he didn't speak with too many Israelis.
That's certainly possible.
By the way, my view is different. I think that we should consider it again and again because it's going to be huge war. It's not an easy one. And we should do it only after we answer to ourselves about 6 elements that I think that I spoke about in the previous meetings is the ammunition stores level, for the ground forces, for the air force, and for the interceptors, the economy, which is after a year of a war. There are some some indications that the situation is not as bad as people anticipated. Legitimacy inside Israel, legitimacy outside Israel, mainly the United States of America. The fatigue of the IDF, the reserve, the regular, and the preparations in the homeland front. These are the 6 elements should be examined by the decision makers, and if they have good enough or good answers, they can make the decision. It's not an easy decision, that's what I want to say. But most of the people in Israel think that I am too cautious and Israel should react immediately.
General Amidror, just a very quick follow-up question. We heard earlier in the summer, Chief of Staff Halevi said the IDF had, was ready to go deal with Hezbollah if need be, and we had heard that there is domestic political pressure inside Israel to return the displaced Israelis to the north by the start of the school year. Is that real political pressure? Is that September 1st still not a deadline, but something to keep an eye on? Is it that much urgency to get the civilians back to the north?
I'll be mute.
You were asking Amidror or myself?
Oh, sorry, I was asking Amidror, but for either of you, yes.
Oh, Amidror, זה אליך, בבקשה.
I think that the pressure is real, but knowing the decision makers, I think that if they come to the conclusion that it is not the right time, they have enough ability to put the pressure aside and to decide the right decision. But the pressure is a real one. There is a real pressure within the Israeli society. It's not a political one, by the way. It's within the Israeli society which think that too many Israelis are living out their homes because of Hezbollah, and that should be changed. But knowing the cautiousness of the decision makers, they will not take a decision based on the pressure. They will take decision based on what they will hear from the IDF, and they examine at least the 6 elements which they are familiar with, and maybe they have more than that. But I have to add something which I think is very important. Ironically, the IDF is much more ready for a war in Lebanon than it was ready for a war in Gaza in last October. In the last 25 years, all the exercises, all the training which was done to most of the units in the IDF, the intelligence investment in the north, the resources which had been allocated by the IDF and other parts of the intelligence community to Lebanon and to Iran are much, much more than was allocated to Gaza. This is probably one of the sources of our mistake in the intelligence. And this is why the preparations are much more advanced than what we had in October in Gaza, and you can see it in the target inside of the preparations. It's huge if you compare it to what we had in Gaza.
I think
I think that ironically, basically, the IDF is more ready for war in Lebanon than it was ready for the war in Gaza. The question is about the resources that we have now. Resources in the political side, legitimacy in the practical side, munitions, war, and so on and so forth. But basically, the IDF is much more prepared for war in Lebanon than it was ready for war in Gaza.
I would just underline General Amidror's last point there for our audience. I don't think that's something we hear very often here. And when you paused at the beginning, I thought after all these years, I had finally stumped you with one of my questions, but it was not to be. So we have just a little bit of time left here. I guess, General Ayish, I'll ask you this question that's a lot of people have been asking me to pose here on the webinar, and it's certainly not the first potentially impossible question I've asked. Do you think it's likely? Do you expect an Iranian response in the next week or so?
I think they will. Now the big question is not if, it's when and how. Now, when we are saying response, we tend to think in terms of things that we have experienced, but we have to be ready to new things. It could be in new areas, it could be in new dimensions, it could be done by proxies, it could be done directly. It's really a matter of what type of risk they want to take. I think there is something that we didn't mention during this evening discussion. I think what we have seen a few weeks ago in Hudaydah is also, and those pictures are in the minds of decision makers in Iran. And it's in their minds, not only in terms of color and flames, but also in terms of range, distance, capabilities, etc. We have demonstrated in the past certain capabilities also in Iran, according to foreign sources. So I think this phase is behind us. Now, the big question is who is going to be selected by the supreme leader to react, and with whom we are going to retaliate. Definitely, if it would come from Lebanon, we'll have to remove that threat. After removing it, there is a big question that I would like to sharpen a bit the considerations mentioned by General Amidror. The war in Lebanon is imminent. Now, the big question is when the time and conditions will be right to conduct it in terms of removing that threat from the northern part of Israel. The question is not the residents that were uprooted from their houses. The question is the strategic situation in the north in the last 10 months. We cannot allow it anymore. Now, we should choose carefully the time and the means and the way in how to change the strategic situation. Right now, we are dealing with something which is, I would say, in a way contained. It's kind of an escalation. The big questions, are we going to lose control? Are they going to lose control? And we will find ourselves in a full-scale war in a very escalated situation, or we are going to find ourselves in a limited escalation. That's the big question. But the rest, it's a matter of time, and it's a matter of readiness, and it will be a matter of decision. This strategic situation have to be changed, because otherwise, those residents won't be able to be back to live on the border, to cultivate their farms when they are under a constant threat. It's impossible. And basically, in that sense, it's not very much different from what we see and experience nowadays in Gaza. We are not going to allow this kind of threat on the residents that are living in the Western Negev. So I think the big question will be when we are going to take the decision, when we are going to have the sufficient legitimacy and resources and support, mainly by the US, to be able and to carry it out. I would like to add on it only one remark vis-a-vis the reserve. I've mentioned the operation that is going on in Gaza. I mentioned that we are dealing with, we are holding the corridor of Netzarim, and we are very active in the neighborhoods over there. Those units are reserve units. And there is a logic behind it. And let me try and explain it. The reason we are using reservists is because we are doing always rotations. We are allowing our regular units to go out, to replenish, to recover, to regroup, to debrief, to recap, to train themselves, and then send them back. And you can find units that fought for many months in the south, ready now in the north. But the whole logic of rotation, which is a responsibility of the operation directorate, is going on from day one. Let's go to the 98th Division. Most of it is reservist with special capabilities. and they are doing their rotation. So the ability really to keep the combat effectiveness of your units in all elements, personal, mental, resources, replenishment, etc., is an art that you have to conduct. Otherwise, you are going to lose control. And the last thing is the alternative. There is no other IDF. There is only one. And that's why we cherish it so much.
I think those are very important and weighty words to end on. It's also getting rather late in Israel. I'd like to thank, as always, Generals Amidror and Ayish for their time and thoughts and candor today. And I would encourage everyone in our audience to keep an eye out on JINSA's website as events unfold in the coming days and weeks. So thank you all. Be well, and we'll see you
you very much.
on another webinar. Thank you both.
Good evening. Thank you.
להתראות.
להתראות.